Good morning, everybody. I think we are live and we can start the meeting. Our sincere apology for our delayed start. It's supposed to be at 12 o'clock, I understand, but I have been held up in a meeting and I am here now. So for the people who don't know me, I am the founder and CEO and principal lawyer of NBML Migration and all the other entities as well. What we have different divisions: employment, commercial, and property law. And I am focusing today on the migration requirements to sponsoring overseas candidates and how you can utilize the different streams to enable you to get overseas candidates, or if someone is already here, how can they change? Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, as I mentioned, we have 4 divisions: commercial, employment, migration, and property law. We operating since 1998 and since 2005 as a law firm. Previously, I was a migration agent. Why we are here? We are here to ensure that we're changing people's life. And that is something which is very, very rewarding, okay? Especially these days, in this modern era. Love is really something very precious. And when a client gets a visa or get a sponsorship approved, they are delighted. And we always feel that we're living on love. Okay, so that's why we are here. Next slide, please. I just hang on 1 second. My computer came up with some restarting, so I don't want to restart this whole computer. Just give me 1 second. I just need to change this. Pick a time, 8. I just have to do this. Yes, okay, it's all good now. Yes, can I have the next slide, please? Yes, it's here. Okay, the agenda for today: how is South Australia DAMA and labor agreement works, which is similar to most of the labor agreements and DAMA processes. Key 2025-26 program updates in South Australia DAMA with the labor agreement, understanding other labor agreements as well. What should business or businesses do to get started and stay fully compliant, and key benefit of the labor agreement and the DAMA for employees and employers. Okay. So first of all, I'm sure you are all familiar with what is DAMA stands for. So it's a designated area migration agreement. And the agreement is actually done through the local body, who is a state body. Sometimes can be the chambers of commerce. Say in Queensland, we have the chambers of commerce in North Queensland and in Townsville. South Australia has a South Australian state body which is offering the DAMA. Western Australia is the same. Today we're not elaborating on Western Australia. And New South Wales has only a regional area DAMA program, Victoria as well, but South Australia DAMA is available in capital city like Adelaide, and in Western Australia is as well in Perth. Okay, so what is the DAMA benefit as well, and how it's operating is, you can seek a concession for lower English for the employees. I think mostly what my observation is, or our business observation is, the most important use is for the DAMA if the occupation is not on a relevant skilled list, and also could be the age of the employees. Usually English and qualification is a requirement, okay? So you don't want to employ people from overseas who don't speak English very well. And also age, that's something, the skills is also very important, because if they don't have the skill and the qualification what you require, that they won't be able to, working for you. The other very important aspect is the DAMA, that you can seek concession for the salaries, which means, especially in the current environment, 10% salary decrease can be substantial, which is maybe $68,000 instead of $76,000 per candidates. And sometimes if you're nominating them in a regional area or Adelaide or Perth, then, that's maybe the relevant market rate anyway, what you would require to pay to them, okay? So these are, in a nutshell, the benefits. So the skilled occupation doesn't offer the position, but you would like to employ them. Sometimes we have requests for truck drivers, for example, or heavy machine operators or other occupations. And therefore, they cannot be brought into the country, but under the DAMA, you are able to offer those occupations and the salary, which is really, really important for the employers, okay, that you can seek the concession. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the steps and how the DAMA works is really very similar to any sponsored visas, okay? So we're talking about the temporary work visa, and this is very similar to that. We don't have a sponsorship requirement on that. This, we don't call it sponsorship, we call it endorsement. So the employing entity must seek an endorsement, okay? And there is something very important here, and I don't think I have ever mentioned this to my clients, and especially in a webinar context, that the DAMA is only available for direct employer, okay? So it's not available for recruiters, okay? The DAMA is only available for direct employers. For labor hire companies, there are other agreements are available. So under the DAMA, the employer must seek endorsement. That's the very first step. Same requirement as when you do a standard business sponsorship application. Financial information, organizational chart, and what is the business requiring, or why is the business requiring, this sponsorship or this endorsement. Once you provided all this information, then the local body would approve your application and endorse your request. Also very important that you would require to undertake labor market testing. Same thing as for the nomination under the 482 temporary workers stream. You have to run it for 28 days. And you have to select the right candidates, or if you have already one candidate in mind, then they would require to apply for the position through the labor market advertising. That's something which is very important as well. Now, if you do this labor market testing for the endorsement and you don't have anybody right now who you want to employ because you're still selecting the candidates, when you go to lodging the nomination and you are out of 4 months, then you would require to do a new labor market testing, okay? Or if you have this DAMA endorsement approved, this is valid for 5 years. So if you would like to sponsor, if you would like to nominate someone in this 5 years, then you would always require to do a fresh labor market testing. So labor market testing required for the DAMA endorsement and also required for the nomination. If you done the DAMA endorsement and the nomination in very close proximity, then you just have the one labor market testing. So this is how you can seek the endorsement, all right? Once you have the endorsement from the relevant body, then you can apply for, it's called under a labor agreement with the Department of Home Affairs for the labor agreement. And this is called an overarching labor agreement because you already have the endorsement from the relevant state body. This is when you're completing the application, you have to select overarching labor agreement, and then the department would process this as a labor agreement, as a DAMA labor agreement, okay? But remember, the very first step is having the endorsement from the relevant local body. Once you lodge the labor agreement, then you can lodge the nomination and the visa application. If your candidate is overseas, our recommendation is for the DAMA to wait until the labor agreement is approved. That doesn't take too long, usually a couple of months. That's our experience anyway. And once the labor agreement is approved, then you can go lodge the nomination and the visa application. If the candidate is in Australia and their visa would expire, then our recommendation is to lodge the labor agreement, the nomination, and the visa application together, okay? So that is something, you know, up to you how you wish to process this, but just if the visa applicant or the candidate who you would like to employ visa would expire, then the 3 steps can be done together. Once again, summary, 4 steps, the DAMA application and the DAMA process. Endorsement by the relevant body, lodge the labor agreement with the department providing the endorsement. Once the labor agreement is lodged, lodge the nomination and lodge the visa application. These are the key criteria. Next slide, please. Currently, there is some updates, and there were some updates which came out yesterday from North Queensland as well. I'm terribly sorry, I cannot give you an update because I haven't had a chance to open that email, but I can certainly send you guys the summary of Far North Queensland updates which came out. But in South Australia, the update is really that they're keeping the occupations until 2026, okay? That is always very beneficial. You know, in migration, the skilled occupation list has changed in December last year. North Queensland hasn't changed their skilled occupation list under the DAMA, and now South Australia is confirming that they won't change it until 2026. It is very important because you are in a process of employing someone. Say we had a client in South Australia where we were in a process of labor market testing, and during the process, the department has removed his occupation from the skilled list, and we are unable to apply for a permanent residency after his temporary visa process. Temporary visa is perfectly fine for him. South Australia also changed the occupation, and his occupation is not on a list. So sometimes you can be caught when the list is changing or the state is requiring other things as well. But currently, South Australia is extending the occupation list. So if you have any candidate in South Australia, then you can proceed until June 2026. Next slide, please. Concession that make hiring easier. Okay, as I mentioned before, under the DAMA concept, we have age concession, then we have skills concession, then we have salary concession, and we have the English language concession. English language concession is really not that huge. You know, maybe you don't require to have level 6 English, but you may require 4.5 overall. So it's not a huge concession, but can be beneficial. But as I mentioned before, you probably wish to employ candidates who are, you know, speaking very good English. Age is definitely a huge concession in my view, because sometimes you find people, they are 47 years of age, and otherwise they wouldn't be able to get any permanent residency, and they may want uproot their family for a temporary 2 or 4 year visa. They would like to see themselves to be able to stay permanently in Australia. For the initial steps, for a temporary work visa, 482, there is no age limit. So, you know, you can employ someone at 60 years of age under the temporary stream. It's just if the candidate would like to stay permanently in Australia, sometimes they won't have an opportunity, and DAMA would give this flexibility. So that's why this is very good for your candidates. On the other hand, I mean, I don't know what is your recruitment requirement, but maybe you say, okay, we have a requirement that we employ people under 50 years of age because of certain requirements within the business. But that's available. Then also, as I mentioned, the salary concession, which is truly your benefit. And I see that most of the time people are using this, and it's very beneficial to the business. Next slide. So now, as I mentioned, we have this DAMA, which is the Designated Area Migration Agreement, which is with a government body, okay, not with the department directly. But now we talk about the labor agreement. And the labor agreement is an agreement between the Department of Home Affairs and the business or the businesses. And in that, as you can see, we have industry-specific labor agreement, we have company-specific labor agreement, and we have on-hire labor agreement. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so in the industry-specific labor agreement, the benefit is that the department has already got a standardized system. Therefore, everything can happen much faster. And here we're talking about industry labor agreements such as the aged care labor agreement. We have the five-star restaurant and five-star hotels labor agreement. Well, sort of, other day I was down in Sydney at Crown, and all the bartenders and all the waitresses were from Italy, right? And they all on a temporary work-sponsored visa because that is a five-star facility, and therefore this industry labor agreement would facilitate to bring them here to Australia. Because as you know, waiters, bartenders, they are not on a skilled occupation list. So that is the key criteria for a labor agreement, that especially if you do as a direct employer, that those occupations are not on a skilled list, all right? Same as for the aged care. The aged care is a very specific one, pre-developed, and the very first step for the aged care DAMA agreement is that you require a memorandum of understanding with the relevant body, and once you have that, then you can lodge your application. And the other very important aspect is that facility, the aged care facility, must be a government approved and licensed facility or care facility. So the other industry-specific labor agreement can be, we're doing right now, we've done aged care, we've done on-hire service, we've done company-specific in construction industry, where people have to do heavy machinery operation. Then also industry-specific can be the churches, the religious businesses. They can also have industry-specific labor agreement for religious workers. Otherwise, they can't sponsor them. So that's in a nutshell what type of industry-specific labor agreements are. And why is that important that we have a specific industry labor agreement? Because everything is standardized. So once you have been approved, everything is, visa application, nomination and visa application is happening much faster. The other very important issue is that the labor agreement, what you're receiving, is valid for 5 years. And during the 5 years, you can vary the occupations, you can add occupations, what you would like to have in your workforce, like if you just done maybe 2 occupations in an initial labor agreement, you can extend that and expand that later on, because this agreement is valid for 5 years. You may ask for 5 candidates only, and now you realize that this is a good vehicle for your business to bring overseas candidates, then you would like to expand and apply for variation. It's applying for variation, that's the process. Then you can seek increasing the number of people. You don't want 5, you want 15. But also immigration will look at, are you compliant with your initial approval? Are you paying the proper salary? Are you paying the superannuation? Have you terminated anybody's employment? So, they look at the big picture, and then they would vary your labor agreement to a higher number. Also, if you didn't ask for age concession, then you can also seek that in a variation. So these are the key attributes to a labor agreement, and that's relevant to each labor agreement, not just the industry-specific labor agreement. Next slide, please. Okay. Company-specific labor agreement. Now, as I mentioned, under the initial industry labor agreement, you have specific occupation what you can apply on there, okay? So the aged care is prescribing what is the disability support worker or whatever the occupation is, I can't remember from top of my head. I think aged care support person or something in that nature, or as I said, in a 5-star labor agreement, then 5-star hospitality labor agreement, then you have waiters, waitress, bartender. So they have a specific occupations, okay, that are not available under the 482 regime. Under the company-specific labor agreement as well, you can only sponsor people where the occupation, what you would like to employ them in, is not on a prescribed temporary skilled list. And that's absolutely understandable, because if you would like to bring in a fitter and turner and that occupation is on a skilled list, then why would you go and, apply for a labor agreement? It's available. But if you would like to bring in fencing specialists, who can do constructing fences, that's, for example, not on the occupation list. Or I have a candidate or a company in Adelaide who is in a cleaning business space, but cleaning high rises, and they require upsellers, and that is again not on an occupation list. So for that purpose, they can seek a company-specific labor agreement. Okay. Very important in a company-specific labor agreement that you provide all your business plan. Why is that important? That this should be approved for you. You must provide labor market testing. You must show that your business has employed Australian citizen. Usually in a company-specific labor agreement, the requirement is, they wouldn't grant you more than 25%, more than, so they wouldn't grant you spots more than 25% of your current Australian employees. So if you have 15 employees, you may be able to seek 4 spots for the labor agreement. That can be varied later on. And in a company-specific application, you must seek other stakeholders, which can be chambers of commerce or industry bodies, but it's very important that you seek a confirmation from the union, and that's usually the Australian Workers' Union, and it has to be a communication with the union that you intend to apply for this labor agreement, because you cannot source your candidates from the Australian labor force. They can not even reply to you, or they can say, no, we're not approving it, but you don't need an approval from them. You require to have you must demonstrate that you're communicating with them, okay? So you brought to their attention that you're seeking this labor agreement, and you must provide it to the Department of Home Affairs. Certainly, if they say, yeah, we're supporting this, then you can provide that supporting letter, okay? But if they just say, yeah, thank you very much, we understand this is your requirement, at this stage we're not approving this request, doesn't matter. immigration still approves the labor agreement, okay? But for their purpose, we must demonstrate that you have been in communication with the union. That's something which is very specific to the company-specific labor agreement. If you are in a regional area like South Australia, then you don't really need this specific labor agreement because DAMA in South Australia is pretty wide occupational list, okay? But maybe in New South Wales, it is more appropriate to seek this company-specific labor agreement. The other labor agreement is the on-hire labor agreement, and this is relevant for recruitment companies, and this is really something similar on a bigger scale than seeking a standard business sponsorship approval. Key difference here is that all the occupation, what an on-hire service is intend to employ people in, has to be on the skilled occupation list. Okay, so it's not like other ones which are no occupation cannot be on or the occupation is not on the skilled occupation list. For an on-hire service, the occupation must be on the skilled occupation list. Okay, again, it's valid for 5 years. You can vary this. Sometimes you might have 30, 40 spots, you know, on that on-hire labor agreement, and before it's coming to an end, you have to renew it so you can continue employ overseas candidate. The very important aspects of each labor agreement as well that you can seek variation for employing these people for permanent residency after the initial period, sometimes 4 years, sometimes 5 years, temporary work. And you should seek to have an approval that these people would be able to apply for a 186 transitional visa. And again, age is not an issue because under the labor agreement, you have an age concession. Next slide, please. Okay. Key benefits of the labor agreement. I think I really explained this throughout the presentation, okay? But the key aspect of having overseas candidates and securing them the visas in Australia, that you can have a long-term employee in a business, a dedicated long-term employee. That's certainly always a two-way street. You know, the employer must do the right thing by the employees, and certainly the employer is appreciating the opportunity to live in this country and also working and earning Australian wages. And your business certainly can have the benefit because they not turn up to work. After 6 months, they're gonna leave, they find another job. So we all know the current labor space in Australia and employment space. It is very hard to find a very committed and diligent employee. Access dedicated and skilled labor, again, sometimes, you know, people are, in my opinion, higher skilled overseas because they have a number of years experience. Say I have a lot of requirement for motor mechanic in certain areas, and they are very well skilled and qualified in the Philippines, and they are very, very good workers. So that's something which, you know, in other industries as well, you can embrace. Flexible workforce mobility, you know, once you have agreements in place, you are much more liberal to advertise and look globally to retain workers directly or through on-hire service. So that's something, again, which is very important. So think ahead. Sometimes a labor agreement, and especially the company-specific one, can take up to 12 to 16 months. And you don't have that time to wait for bringing in people from overseas. So therefore, if you have something in place, then you can rely on that labor agreement and bring the candidate in. cost-effective hiring, you know. I would say maybe that's not really that beneficial because you must pay the relevant salary level, you know. But if in Australia a salary is, say, $90,000, you also, even if the base salary, according to immigration, is $76,000 minus 10% under the DAMA regime or under the labor agreement, then maybe the market rate is not $68,000, $69,000, but could be $83,000. And in that instance, you must pay that salary to the candidate, okay? Usually in a regional area, the salaries are not as high as in capital cities, and you can rely on a local salary level. Build a reliable global talent pool. I think what I have seen and what my experience is, once you have a established and dedicated overseas candidate, they would have relatives or friends or family members who would be, you know, available for another or for a visa or to bring them over here to work in Australia. So actually you can develop that and you would have a much easier run at the next time when you would like to employ someone from overseas. Next slide, please. Okay, what businesses should consider. So it's really the importance of what is your next 12 months or 2 years requirements. And sometimes, you know, my clients say, oh, you know, oh, this is not that, you know, I don't like to use the word cheap exercise, you know, but this is a little bit costly exercise because the government is charging the self-levy, charging this, charging that, professional fee if you engage in a law firm, or if you do it yourself, you don't pay for that, but it's expense, right? And I always say to my clients, this is not really an expense. This is an investment, okay? Because if you're investing in your overseas employees, you can have them for almost the lifetime of the business. I have one of my employees who is with me and I sponsored him almost 20 years ago. Yesterday we just talked and he says, I am over 40 years of age. I said, Jesus, I employed you when you were a young university student, you know. So this is how long time I have him. And I think it is absolutely beneficial for the business to looking into that and plan for this and expand into the global talent space. Also, you know, currently we have the huge demand for construction workers, air condition mechanics, you know, motor mechanics. I mean, all our clients, small and big enterprises, are screaming for employees. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know why people are moving around and I don't want to do this, I do this, but that's my observation. And they looking to have overseas candidates in their books. So therefore, it is important that you plan ahead. If you require labor agreements or standard business sponsorship, while we are not talking about standard business sponsorship, I just would like to mention one thing. It is very, very beneficial if you have used this vehicle, the temporary work visa stream, if you use this vehicle in the past and you have over $4 million turnover, that you seek an accredited specialist sponsorship. Because once you are accredited, then you will get the nomination and the visa sometimes in one day. Okay, so you are not subject to a lengthy processing time. Also, if you have these labor agreements in place, then you have a much faster and the streamlined process for the nomination and the visa application. And I think prepare a compliance. Yeah, compliance with all these agreements is very important, but it's important in all visa stream. you must show that you're paying the proper salary, you're compliant with Australian industrial law, and you can terminate an employment anytime, doesn't matter they are visa holders or not, but you must follow the Australian industrial law requirements, under the Fair Work, and then you can terminate their employment. Certainly a visa applicant also can say, oh, thank you very much, I'm not, happy, so I'm leaving. And you cannot say, oh, but I sponsored you and now you're leaving, okay? The important aspect of this is that if you have paid 3-year or 4-year SEF levy, that if an employee is terminated or is leaving, then you will be entitled to recover the SEF levy from the department. Also remember that when you're sponsoring overseas candidate, if you're paying for their visa application, so it's not for sponsorship and nomination, but you're paying for their visa application, government or professional fee, then you can recover that cost, okay? That is legal. You cannot recover your nomination and your sponsorship fee from the candidate, okay? Next slide, please. Employer-sponsored visas, yeah, we have the different employer-sponsored visas. We have the skills in demand 482, what I mentioned before, that has 2 separate streams, SID core and SID specialist visa stream. Probably you all know of this. Today we're really focusing on labor agreements. Then you have employer nomination, which can have 2 streams. One is the direct entry 186 visa, and the other one is the transitional, when someone is holding a 482 visa and transiting to permanent residency, and they must demonstrate that they worked with the company and they worked not with the company but with the nominating employer for minimum 2 years, okay? Skilled regional visa, that's a 494, that's maybe has different occupation list, and in that, the employer must, the employee must have minimum 3 years work experience in occupation and must have minimum English level 6 and must have skills assessment. So that is not the easiest process from a visa applicant point of view, but it's the same like as a sponsorship for the employer. And the 191 is the subsequent visa to a 494. That is not a 186, it's a 191, and that's the employee who is gonna step this through, because they need to demonstrate that they worked 3 years in a regional area with the nominating employer and they lived in a regional area. Next slide. Now we came to the question and answer, all right? And you can ask me any questions and I am trying to answer them. No questions? Maurizio, no questions? Can you moderate, please?
Hi, Agnes. It's Ernest. We don't have any questions so far.
Yes. If we don't have any questions, then we close the meeting and close the session. So thank you so much for your attendance and hope you have learned something today. Okay, please scan scan the QR code, and then we are here to support you in your future steps. Have a lovely day, everybody. Bye for now.